Entrepreneurial Edge is brought to you by Business Banking from FNB, because small ideas can lead to big business. FNB, how can we help you?
Hello and welcome to the Entrepreneurial Edge. I'm Chris Bishop. Now on this program, we always look at what drives people to become entrepreneurs. Picture this. You've qualified as a chartered accountant. You are made a partner at Deloitte & Touche at the tender age of 28. You're comfortable and set up for life. Why then would you want to leave after 2 years and risk everything? Well, that's exactly what Vivien Natasen did. He started with 7 employees in 2003 and now he has 300. He began on a wing and a prayer and ended up sponsoring the World Cup. How did he do it? Well, we'll hear from him in a moment. First, let's take a closer look at his business.
Neo Africa is the brainchild of Group CEO Vivien Natasen. In August 2003, Vivien left Deloitte & Touche to form Neo Solutions, which is a 100% black-owned company specializing in niche market consulting, primarily in the areas of fleet and facilities management, consulting, and PPPs, which is public and private partnerships. If you look at our 2 business units, we've got Neo Solutions. The target market for Neo Solutions is primarily private or corporate sector work, or government or public sector work. And if you look at Neo Lifestyle, we encompass both those target markets as well as the individual consumer market. Neo Africa has been able to grow from strength to strength, so quite substantially over the last 8 years. We started with 7 employees in 2003 and we now employ over 300. This can be attributed to the strength of the group, our expert resources, our industry knowledge, our strong partnerships and relationships, and specifically targeted sponsorship and social upliftment. Neo Africa was quite fortunate to come through the recent economic downturn seemingly unscathed and continues to grow as a market leader in the industries we work in.
There's a taste for the business. Now we have in the studio with us the boss himself, Vivien Natasen. Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Edge. Now, what begs the question, what caused you to give up what was a very comfortable and very certain life to risk everything?
I think there's a little bit of a background to that evolution. I wasn't just 2 years at Deloitte firstly. I started in articles straight after the university in Natal, grew through the articles into a manager position and then ultimately to partner. But I also studied on 2 levels. One was the accounting side and the other one was on the computer audit side. So being highly specialized and getting into the trenches was part of my ethos then. And I pushed really hard. I think there were months that I even had billable hours of sitting at 250 to 280 hours coming through the system. But that involved some sacrifice too. Now, I was made partner in 2001, and at that time there was the issues of the Enrons and the, obviously 9/11 happened a little bit afterwards, which affected the South African practice in a way. But part of my decision to depart was also influenced by the fact that my dad, who was also an entrepreneur with his own businesses down in Durban, was killed in an armed robbery there. So I think there was a series of life-changing moments that gave rise to the decision to say, maybe I should try a different tact.
Now your father, he was a personnel manager in his career, and later in life he became an entrepreneur at the bottle store. He was a great influence on you, because when you were at college, you were actually working for him at the same time, weren't you?
Yeah, it was great. He started up his first business at the time when I just got into university. So it was great having the theoretical background that I was studying at university, as well as being coupled with the physical, practical experience of getting in the trenches and getting the first bottle store off the ground.
And then in 2002, I understand, came this personal tragedy, which you say affected you in your decision to become an entrepreneur. Just tell us a little bit about how this affected you and how it did alter your mind.
Yeah, I think every individual has a kind of recipe. And when you stay true to that recipe, it kind of grows, it helps you grow faster. So mine was to be there, down there in the trenches. And I found, especially at partner level, you have to now elevate to an admin type of role, and you can't really get out there into the clients at the grassroots you want to be at. So that really affected me first. Then linking on to my dad's issue, the moment that happened, it forced me in that 1 month at least to step back and say, what exactly do I want to achieve from life, and what is the change I want to make in the world?
Because it wasn't only your father, it was also your brother, I understand, as well. How painful at the time, and how did you come out of it as a hardened entrepreneur?
I think first was the shock element to deal with. I mean, when we were a very small nuclear family of 4 people, so my brother, myself, and my parents. And so having one element being removed, and I had already made the move to Johannesburg then from Durban. So I was a little bit distant to the situation when it happened, and literally had to get down to Durban within a few hours on a Friday evening. But yeah, I think it didn't harden me as such, and especially since the four guys who did it, who murdered him, they were never found. So for me, the first phase or the first 2 years of it was more to understand what could I do differently so that situation doesn't happen to anyone else, as opposed to let me go and try and grab a posse and go and hunt down people. So it's economics that determines whether people resort to crime. And I always felt that the CBD of Durban, where they were killed in, or where my dad was killed in, was exactly where it needed to start in terms of remedying the situation. So it evolved me to the point, especially on the projects that I select to get on now, I choose the ones that are in grassroots that help to empower at the lowest level, and hopefully it'll steer those people away from crime.
And you emerged from this tragedy, and then you started with your own business with, I understand, 150,000 Rand was your first capital. Just tell us about those humble beginnings. I think firstly, you need a little bit of luck to be an entrepreneur as well. So I think I was firstly fortunate to be highly specialized in fleet management, public-private partnerships, etc. So the transition of leaving Deloitte at the stage was not that great a change. I just carried on with a new employer being myself the next day. And in fact, I had to subcontract back to Deloitte anyway, because there were certain projects that had to be completed that I had to complete for them. But what helped was having an expert status in those areas of fleet management, etc. So it made securing clients a little bit easier for us. We did, however, get into some new territories. So we assisted City of Johannesburg with a few things, the National Prosecuting Authority on selection of their new buildings, and helped them with some business process redesign. So that kept us going and helped get the base in. And once you have a decent base to sustain the operating costs from, I think you can start to experiment a little bit on new areas. And those early cash flow problems?
I think, we were fortunate is that, having the ability to carry we started with 3 people. By the end of the first year, we ended on 7 people. But I think the relationship with our clients was good enough that we got paid on time, and the bridging finance wasn't that huge of a burden for the first 2 years. As we started investing capital-based projects, then that burden shifted slightly, but again, we were fortunate in securing the right level of finance.
Just in a nutshell, in layman's terms, just describe the core of your business now.
As it stands today, if you ask me what we do, it's more than a consulting practice. 3 years ago, we were a really good consulting business that gets down into the trenches and takes on risk-based projects but delivers them slightly differently. We don't believe in getting into a client and doing a report and then leaving that report hopefully to get some implementation from the client. We believe in what we call interim management. So where there's an issue, the client calls us in, we fix everything, train our replacement staff, and we prefer to exit. We don't like long-term projects where we're doing the same job on year 5 that we were doing in year 1. So that experience has evolved now to what we call infrastructure services. And we cover areas from banking, telecoms, transportation, building infrastructure. We're quite large in renewables now. We do a lot of work firstly on the carbon management side, and now more importantly, we're at the full renewable phase itself. So those 5 areas we believe are the future, as opposed to just purely consulting. We haven't aligned ourselves like a lot of South African companies prefer to align themselves with a particular brand or overseas product, and then they only sell their product. We've stayed agnostic of that, so we look for the best product to suit an application in the client's best interest.
So from that first year with a handful of employees to now when you got more than 300, I mean, what was your turnover in the first year and what's your turnover now?
The first year we clocked about 7.5 million Rand turnover, which wasn't bad, and as I said, we had invested in more people then. This year we hit close on 285 million.
And how difficult was it in those early days to convince the lenders that you had a good idea? Obviously, years later, it's proved to be true, but how difficult was it back then?
Well, we were not that heavily leveraged. So our model has been, we generate the cash and we use it within the business to make sure that we sustain ourselves. And quite often, we incubate our new thinking within the Neo Solutions unit itself anyway. So nowadays, where the projects have become much more capital intensive, I think the credibility of us having delivered large scale projects, we are the incumbent in a consortium with the Taxi Recap program, which is a 9 billion rand project from the state. We developed the first corruption-proof drivers and learners testing system, which we rolled out in 2005. The first few, as I said, we built them as consulting projects, so each phase was paid for as we completed it. Nowadays, we're fortunate on many of our projects is we can roll them out and we can charge on a pay-per-use type concept.
As an entrepreneur, as policy, how much of your annual turnover do you reinvest back into the business?
No, pretty much. Well, in terms of turnover, I would say 30 to 40%, which is pretty much most of the profit margin. I think at a personal level, I always felt that Neo was a concept and an idea that I gave birth to, and it needed to get to where it needs to get to. So obviously there's a slight priority shift. I got married last year, only just before I turned 40 now. So my priorities have shifted slightly now since then. But generally before that, it was really Neo was the lifeblood, and my name and Neo's name was synonymous at that point in time. I am in the process of trying to detach me from the company a little bit more, and then there's certain things that are being handed over to the management team to run with more than I would run with it.
What were the worst of times in these early years of your business? What were the worst times for you?
I think, especially since we are primarily a state, we do a lot of work with the state. There were times when the cash flows of the state were slower in coming in than they would have, especially as you get towards the end of the state's financial year and they're busy trying to sort out their books and know what they can spend when, and we've got to delay payment till the new year. But I think we've been lucky. We didn't run off overdraft model, so we've been cash or liquid up to the point of being able to carry those cash flows. But there were times when you question whether you're going to make it, And I think every entrepreneur goes with that. The key to being an entrepreneur is that you're always all in. So it's like the biggest game of poker ever throughout your life. And yes, at some point you start to detach a little bit from that when you say, fine, we've got the stable base, and do I change my risk profile a little bit? Up to last year, it was generally an all-in situation all the time.
Briefly, finally, in this half, how do you deal with it? Are you a sleepless nights man? How do you deal with the stress of being an entrepreneur?
Well, I'm used to being a 20-hour-a-day person. So the nights are quite short when you need them to be, and then you just get the next part done. It's timing. I think a lot of any good business will always catch when you're getting to a peak of a curve, you need to learn how to catch the next wave. And we've been lucky in predicting that correctly. So the phase change of our own business right now helps us to stabilize but keep the maturing parts of our business still innovative. But at the same time, the new elements to the business has really unlocked a lot of new doors that we hadn't seen 3 years ago.
Okay, Vivien, hold that thought there. We're going to talk about your business a lot more and the World Cup in the second half. It's time for a quick ad break. Don't go anywhere.